What would you do if your new dream home came with a neighborhood dictator? She blocked my driveway, towed my car, and tried to destroy my business. She thought I was just another easy target. But she made one fatal mistake. She declared war on a former combat engineer. This is how I fought back with a solution so permanent, so immovable, it didn't just win the war, it erased her from the map. The first time I saw the concrete barriers, I thought it was a mistake. The second time I knew it was a warning. The third time, at 6 a.m. on a frozen Colorado morning, steam rising from my abandoned coffee mug, I understood it was war. 3 monolithic blocks were positioned with surgical precision across my driveway. The sharp alkaline scent of fresh concrete mixed with the morning frost, a smell that would forever be linked to pure, undiluted rage. The woman responsible, Cassandra Cass Volk, believed she was harassing a helpless, middle-aged widow who'd simply roll over and pay her ridiculous fines. What she didn't know was that she'd just poked a bear, who'd spent 22 years building bridges and blowing them up for Uncle Sam. My name is Elena Vasquez, 54 years old, a retired Army combat engineer, and 6 months before this concrete war began, I thought I'd found my peaceful retirement. After my husband Carlos passed, I used his life insurance and my pension for a down payment on a corner lot in the quiet suburb of Pinecrest Meadows. The house was modest, but it had one feature I loved, a wide, welcoming circular driveway. After a lifetime of taking orders, I'd started a small, remote project management business. That driveway meant my occasional clients, usually just 1 or 2 a week, could park without bothering a soul. I'd done my homework. I'd studied every deed restriction, every HOA covenant, every municipal code. Nothing prohibited a home-based business. Nothing. Then I met Cass Volk. Cass was 49, with the smile of a real estate shark and a Lexus she worshipped like a pagan idol. She lived in the oversized colonial at the end of the street, the one with the non-regulation fence that somehow never received a violation. HOA president for life, it seemed. Our first encounter was on a Tuesday. I was carrying a laptop bag to my sensible SUV when she materialized on my property. "You need to move that commercial vehicle," she announced. No hello, no introduction. Her perfume was a cloying wave of jasmine and entitlement. "This is my personal vehicle," I said, my Army-trained poker face firmly in place. "Which you use for commercial purposes." She clicked a gold pen. "I've documented the traffic. It disrupts our community's character." The tone was the killer. It was the same dismissive, talking down to the help voice I'd endured from incompetent officers for 2 decades. It made my jaw ache. 3 days later, the official violation notice arrived, $150 for unauthorized commercial vehicle storage, with threats of $500 daily fines. I spent the weekend buried in paperwork. The covenants were clear, home businesses were allowed. But Cass's weapon was a deliberately vague clause on page 32 that could be twisted to ban a kid's lemonade stand. When I called for an appeal, her assistant sweetly informed me the earliest hearing was in 7 weeks. The fine deadline was 7 days. Classic extortion. So I paid the blood money. And I made 2 decisions. First, I would document everything. Second, I would study Cass Volk until I knew her weaknesses better than she knew her own reflection. She thought she was dealing with a weary widow. She was actually dealing with a master of terrain and tactics. The taste of that humiliation burned, but I reminded myself, patience builds the strongest foundations, and I was about to build something she could never, ever tear down. The security cameras I installed were my early warning system, 4 high-definition sentinels that covered every inch of my property. Within 2 weeks, they delivered gold. There she was, at 11:53 p.m. on a Tuesday, caught in the crisp, ghostly glow of infrared. Cass Volk, in a designer coat, measuring my driveway with a surveyor's tape. The audacity was breathtaking. She was trespassing to gather ammunition. The next morning, she approached as I was unloading office supplies. "Elena, we need to discuss your ongoing situation." "Funny you should mention that," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I was just reviewing some fascinating security footage from last night. I didn't know midnight surveying was a board responsibility." For a glorious second, her mask shattered into a mosaic of panic. It snapped back just as fast. "I was conducting a routine community assessment," she said, her voice slick as oil. "We've had complaints." "From who?" "Confidential board business." I pulled out my phone and showed her the image. Her, crouched in the dark, the measuring tape glinting. Must have missed the chapter on stealth evaluations in the procedures manual. Her emergency board meeting was a kangaroo court. She had PowerPoints, aerial photos, a whole presentation designed to make my quiet corner lot look like a bustling industrial complex. When my turn came, I stood slowly. "Thank you for the creative interpretation," I began. I distributed highlighted covenants proving my business was legal. I presented logs showing minimal client visits. Then I played my first legal card. Furthermore, this meeting was announced via email with only 48 hours notice. Our bylaws and Colorado law require 72-hour written notice to all homeowners. "This proceeding is invalid," the room erupted. That's when I found my first ally. Arthur Pembroke, a retired judge in his 70s with sharp eyes and a spine of steel. "The young lady is correct." His voice boomed, silencing the chaos. "This meeting is a violation of procedure." Cass's gavel banged like a death knell. The meeting adjourned in disarray, but the look she gave me was pure, molten hatred. She wasn't done. The next escalation was financial terrorism. I woke up to find my SUV gone, towed, from my own driveway. The impound lot demanded $375 in cash. It was a gut punch, a calculated move to break me. Arthur appeared at my door with coffee and a grim expression. "Predatory towing," he explained. "In Colorado, it requires 48-hour written notice. She has none. The penalties can be severe." As we drove to retrieve my vehicle, the financial noose tightened in my mind. But that evening, a miracle arrived in the form of Mrs. Gable, an elderly neighbor with a lemon cake and a heart of gold. She made the Millers take down their son's treehouse, she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. The boy cried for days. "She finds the Garcias for their native plants garden. She's a bully, Elena, and you're the first one to stand up to her." The puzzle pieces snapped together. I wasn't her only victim. I was just the first one who had the means and the will to fight back. The war was no longer just about my driveway. It was for the soul of the neighborhood. The war room was my dining room. Arthur provided legal strategy. Mrs. Gable provided intelligence and baked goods. But the game changer was Ben Mackenzie, my old sergeant from the 1st Engineer Battalion. "Vasquez, you gorgeous rebel," he boomed, crushing me in a hug. "Arthur told me you have a pest problem." Mac owned a landscaping and hardscaping company. He looked at my problem with the mind of a man who'd built fortifications under fire. "Here's the plan," he said, sketching on a napkin. "Not planters. Something better. Low-profile, reinforced concrete retaining walls and boulder clusters. We'll create a decorative landscape feature that follows your property line. Each boulder is 5,000 pounds. The walls are footings dug 4 feet down. It's not a barrier. It's erosion control and xeriscaping. Totally legal and completely immovable. The beauty was in the details. The structures were all just low enough to not require permits, and the covenants had no restrictions on natural stone landscaping. It would cost me $10,000, my entire emergency fund, but it was an investment in permanent victory. We discovered Cass was scheduled for a weekend real estate conference. The installation would be a blitzkrieg, completed before she returned. The trucks arrived at dawn on Saturday. Mac's crew worked with military precision. They didn't pour obvious planters. They sculpted the land. They embedded massive, beautiful sandstone boulders into the earth, building a subtle, serpentine wall that curved along my driveway's edge. It looked like a high-end natural landscape design, but it was a fortress. No vehicle would ever get close to blocking my driveway again without a wrecking crew. Monday morning, Cass's return was everything I dreamed. Her Lexus screeched to a halt. She sat staring for a full 5 minutes. The meltdown was spectacular. She called building inspectors who found everything perfectly legal. She hired lawyers who discovered a fatal flaw in her own armor and quickly dropped her case. But her most desperate move was a neighborhood petition against my hazardous rock formations. She collected only 2 signatures. The tide had turned. The neighborhood was now united behind me. The final showdown was at the emergency HOA meeting. The community center was packed. A local news crew was even there. Cass, dressed for a battle she had already lost, presented her insane PowerPoint, painting my beautiful landscaping as a threat to public safety. When I stood, I felt a profound calm. "Thank you, Cassandra. I have some supplementary materials." I presented the timeline of her harassment, the illegal towing, the midnight surveying, the witness statements from the Millers, the Garcias, and others. The room simmered with shared anger. Then Arthur stood. "Before we proceed, His voice cut through the noise. "There is the matter of board eligibility." He held up county records. "Cassandra Volk is delinquent on her HOA assessments to the tune of $7,200. Under Colorado law, this automatically disqualifies her from serving on the board. Every fine she has issued, every decision she has made for the past 20 months, is legally void." The room exploded. The news cameras zoomed in. Cass's face went from rage to terror to utter defeat. She screamed about lies and lawsuits, but her power was gone, evaporated in the face of cold, hard facts. She resigned within 24 hours. Her house was on the market a week later. I watched the moving trucks leave without an ounce of pity. In the aftermath, Pinecrest Meadows blossomed. Arthur became the new HOA president, instituting transparency and fairness. My business thrived. My landscaping was featured in a local magazine. The boulders and walls, my immovable objects, became a symbol of resilience. Sometimes, I sit on my porch with Sarah, a wonderful woman I met after the dust settled, and watch her daughter play hopscotch between the very stones that secured our freedom. Cass Volk taught me the most valuable lesson of all. Bullies only understand one language: unyielding force. And sometimes, the most powerful response isn't a shout, but a silence so solid, so deeply anchored, that it shakes their world apart. Peace, I discovered, was not a destination you arrived at, but a garden you had to tend. For 6 glorious months, we tended ours. Arthur Pembroke's leadership transformed the HOA from a feared institution into a community hub. My circular driveway, once a battleground, was now the site of monthly neighborhood potlucks. The sound of laughter, not screaming, filled the air. My relationship with Sarah deepened, and her daughter, Lily, had claimed my sprawling, boulder-protected yard as her personal kingdom. My project management business was thriving, and I'd even started consulting pro bono for other homeowners tangled in HOA disputes. Life was good, but a ghost was stirring in the machine. It started subtly. A flicker on a security camera feed at 3 a.m., dismissed as a glitch. A few residents receiving duplicate, slightly garbled emails about non-existent committee meetings. Then, the financial statements came. Arthur stood in my kitchen, his usual calm replaced by a deep frown. He laid his tablet on the counter. "Elena, take a look at this." It was the HOA's quarterly financial report. Clean, professional, except for one line item under legal services, special projects, $2,500. Special projects? I asked. "We haven't had any special projects. We settled the last of Cass's frivolous lawsuits months ago." "Precisely," Arthur said, tapping the screen. "I've requested the invoices from our management company 3 times. Silence. When I called, they said the request had to come from the board treasurer. Barbara Higgins." Barbara was a sweet, retired librarian who balanced the books with meticulous, old-school precision. She was trustworthy but technologically timid. "I spoke to Barbara," Arthur continued. "She's confused. She says she authorized no such payment, but the digital approval has her electronic signature." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. This wasn't the blunt force trauma of Cass Volk. This was something stealthier, more insidious. A poison in the veins, not a hammer to the face. My old army instincts, the ones that sensed an IED long before you saw the wires, were humming. "This isn't an error, Arthur. This is a hack." Our investigation, conducted in quiet living rooms and over encrypted calls, revealed a chilling reality. Cass Volk's final act of vengeance wasn't a scream. It was a whisper. Before her inglorious exit, she had installed a poison pill. Mac, whose practical genius extended to tech, helped us trace it. "She didn't just leave," he grumbled, hunched over my laptop. "She left a back door. A keylogger on the old HOA computer, probably installed during one of her midnight assessments. She's been harvesting passwords for months. The $2,500 was a test. A probe of the system she had created. The fake emails, the camera glitches, it was all her. She was remotely puppeteering the very bureaucracy she once ruled, siphoning funds and sowing chaos from wherever she was hiding. We had the evidence. We could go to the police, shut it down. But Arthur, the former judge, saw a bigger problem. "This proves malicious intent, yes," he said, steepling his fingers. "We can freeze the accounts, prosecute her, but it will be a long, messy legal battle. The neighborhood's hard-won peace will be shattered by subpoenas and scandal. The financial and emotional cost would be immense. She wins by dragging us back into the mud." He was right. A public fight was what she wanted. It would taint our victory. We don't fight her in the mud, I said, the plan crystallizing in my mind. We fight her in the code. We don't expose her. We trap her. Operation Ghost Hunt began. Instead of blocking her access, we laid a digital snare. With Mac's help, we created a honeypot, a fake, ultra-sensitive file on the HOA server labeled Confidential Legal Strategy versus Volk. Inside, we placed a detailed and completely fictional plan about a lawsuit to seize her remaining assets based on newly discovered financial malfeasance. Then, we watched. 2 days later, our security alert triggered. The ghost took the bait. Cass accessed the file from an IP address traced to a short-term rental in Scottsdale, Arizona. She downloaded it, and in her haste, she triggered a hidden tracking program Mac had embedded. We had her. Not just for hacking, but for attempting to access privileged legal documents to undermine a potential case against her. It was a felony, but we didn't call the police. Not yet. Arthur placed a single calm phone call to Scottsdale. "Cassandra," he said, his voice as dry and steady as a courtroom affidavit. "This is Arthur Pembroke. I trust you found the file informative." The silence on the other end was absolute. I could imagine the blood draining from her face. "We have the digital fingerprint of your access, your location, and your intent." Arthur continued. "The Scottsdale PD Cybercrimes Unit has a fascinating dossier waiting for them. Or you can wire $2,500, the exact sum you stole, back into the HOA account within the hour. You will then permanently delete all accessed data and sever every connection to Pinecrest Meadows. Do this, and we will consider the matter closed. Hesitate, and you will be explaining your actions to an Arizona judge." There was no screaming, no tantrum, just a choked, "Understood." The money was wired back in 47 minutes. The digital ghost vanished. The poison was purged. This victory felt different from the first. Quieter. There were no news cameras, no cheering crowds. But it was, in some ways, more profound. We hadn't just beaten her with a bigger hammer. We had outmaneuvered her. We had used her own secrecy and malice against her, protecting our community without ever disturbing its peace. Watching the sunset from my porch that evening, with Sarah's hand in mine and Lily chasing fireflies around the immovable boulders, I understood the final lesson. Some battles are won with concrete and confrontation. Others are won with silence, strategy, and the unwavering will to protect the peace you've built. The war was finally, truly, over. The silent, digital defeat of Cass Volk was the final decisive battle. The poison was purged, the stolen funds returned, and her ghost was exorcised from our systems for good. In the weeks that followed, a profound and unshakable calm settled over Pinecrest Meadows. The victory was no longer just a triumph over a tyrant. It was the deep foundational peace that comes after a war has been truly, irrevocably won. Arthur Pembroke, with Barbara Higgins' diligent oversight, implemented a digital covenant, a set of clear, robust cybersecurity protocols for the HOA. Passwords were changed, access was audited, and two-factor authentication became mandatory. The neighborhood wasn't just physically safe. It was now digitally fortified. My life, once defined by resistance, was now filled with a quiet, fulfilling rhythm. My project management business, buoyed by its tyrant slayer reputation, allowed me to be selective, taking only the projects I was passionate about. The best part of my days, however, were the evenings spent on my porch. I would sit there with Sarah, our hands intertwined, watching the world we had saved. Lily, now bursting with the confidence of a child who felt utterly secure, had organized a rock climbing club with the other kids, using my strategic boulders as their personal mountain range. Their joyful shouts were the ultimate victory music, a sound that erased the last echoes of Cass Volk's threats. One Saturday, we hosted a neighborhood barbecue, a reclamation celebration. The circular driveway was full of life. The Millers' new, even better treehouse was visible over the fence. The Garcias proudly gave tours of their expanded, covenant-approved native plant garden, which was now a certified wildlife habitat. Mr. Henderson was teaching a group of teenagers how to grill the perfect burger. Arthur found me by the lemonade table, a rare, relaxed smile on his face. "You know, Elena," he said, nodding toward the laughing crowd, "we didn't just win a dispute. We built an ecosystem. It's self-sustaining now. The values are baked in," he was right. The neighborhood had developed its own immune system. New residents were welcomed not with a list of rules, but with a potluck dish and the story of how a community learned to stand together. The legend of the immovable boulders was passed down, not as a story of conflict, but as a lesson in resilience and the right to peaceful enjoyment. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows from the very stones that had secured our freedom, I felt a chapter of my life close with a sense of perfect finality. The battle was over. The mission was accomplished. I looked at Sarah, who smiled with understanding, and then at Lily, who was now trying to crown our gentle giant, Mac, with a daisy chain. The retired combat engineer stood patiently, a soft smile on his usually gruff face. This was what we had fought for. This simple, profound, ordinary happiness. The lesson Cass Volk taught me was complete. Bullies can only take the power you give them. And the lesson my new life taught me was even greater. True strength isn't just about being an immovable object against a force. It's about being a foundation upon which good, joyful, and peaceful things can grow. I had spent my first career building and blowing up bridges for the Army. In my second act, I had built a different kind of bridge, one that connected a community and allowed them to cross over from fear to freedom. The structure was sound, the work was done,